Welcome to the On Record podcast. This is a podcast where we talk with professionals and subject matter experts from diverse markets that are using video and audio in innovative ways to support their organization's objectives. My name is Mike Anzalone, and my co-host is Kyle Shellstadt. And our guest today is Deb Tauber. Deb is the founder and CEO of Innovative Simulation Solutions, and she's also the host of Simulation Cafe podcast. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here today.
We're excited to have you as well. And before we, kind of hop into the conversation, I'm always fascinated how people get involved with simulation because it seems to be like such a niche market in healthcare. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got involved with simulation and what brought you to found your company?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. So I'm a nurse by trade, and I worked primarily emergency medicine for the first 25 years of my career. I was involved in when trauma became level trauma. So it went from people would go to the closest hospital, and then in the 80s, they came up with the idea of having hospitals take trauma patients depending on their level of care that they needed. And so I was blessed to work in a level 1 trauma center and help, organize it, which was really a great opportunity. And at one point in my career, I started to be the clinical educator of the emergency department. And being the clinical educator, I was responsible for making sure that everyone knew what they were doing. And we were using simulation, but we weren't calling it that. We were just doing it. We were doing drills with patients and, staff members. And so after I left the emergency department, I took a job at Chamberlain College of Nursing. And they brought me into the simulation center and said, you know what? You're good with kids. We want you to set up this pediatric mannequin. And I thought, yeah, I'm good with kids, but I'm good with real kids and sick kids, not a mannequin, not a simulator. And so I was fortunate enough to be introduced to simulation through Chamberlain and had the opportunity to set up the stuff for peds. And what I learned was that there was this whole different science to healthcare using simulation. And I had thought to myself, if I could have used simulation when I was working in the ER and actually knew what we were doing, I would have used it for training decisions. Because it's really hard to, you get 5 resumes and 5 people have great references. They came from amazing schools and their GPAs were top of their class. However, you put them into a situation and they might not be able to respond under the type of pressure that, is there. And if you were able to use simulation to determine people who have the ability to prioritize, to delegate, to communicate effectively, and not to panic, it would have been a lot easier in my career to make hiring decisions. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to let someone go because they were too panicked in an ER. When you were working, it's not good for the person, and it wasn't good for me either. Because you need people to be calm.
So when you were setting up the pediatric simulators, what age did they go from, like a little preemie baby all the way up to 6-7 months? How did that work?
We had the Gamard pediatric and the Gamard infant. So little Hal, and that's the 2 that we had there. At Chamberlain, they used several different simulators products from Laerdal, from CAE, as well as from Gamard. Laerdal, which is still Laerdal, CAE, which is now Elevate, and then Gamard, which was Gamard and still Gamard.
When you were training those students, particularly in pediatrics, one of the things that I've come across in working with simulation professionals and educators was this idea of they would be studying like time to intervention aspects of simulation. And it was interesting because some of the research would tell me in those studies, they would find that students would be more nervous with a pediatric scenario than they were with an adult scenario. How, number one, is that your experience? And if that's your experience, like how were you able to overcome that reluctance? Gee, I'm working on a tiny little baby, and they're just maybe more of a nervous factor.
Oh, Mike, that's very, very, very true. And it's not in simulation. I mean, it's in real life. When I worked in the level 1 trauma center in the emergency department, that was 100% true. That when a pediatric patient came in compared to an adult in a trauma, in a full arrest, in anything, anxiety levels went up. It's just that helpless feeling. So one of the things that we did was we got something called a Broslow tape. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
It's a tape measure that you put on the gurney when the patient comes in, and then you measure the child, and they fall into a different color. And whatever color they fall into, like it's orange or blue or pink, purple, red, there's a corresponding drawer with the correct size of equipment, because that would be one of the things that was so different from adults than children, is their sizes are so different, and you need to make sure that you have the right equipment. So that was one of the things that really helped. And then I incorporated that into using it in simulation, so that the learners would learn right from the get-go how to use this system for measuring. And it gives you a place to focus instead of just thinking about the fact that you're taking care of someone's most important person in their whole world.
We've seen a variety of use cases for video in simulation. What are some of the more popular use cases that you've seen and that you've used in your career?
So one of the things I love to use video for is for aided, like introducing yourself, acknowledging the patient, and making sure that introductions are done. And I think that, are you familiar with aided?
I would probably mess up if I said yes. It sounds familiar.
So
is it something to do with disability?
No, it's an acronym for how to introduce yourself to a patient. So you acknowledge them, then you introduce them, you introduce yourself, AID, give them time durations, E, what to expect, and then thank them. Because especially now that we live in such a technological society, it's even more challenging for new people to learn how to communicate with patients. Like they would literally stand outside the door. And like, do I have to go in there? Yeah, you do. As the clinical instructor, yes, you do need to go in there. You do need to acknowledge them, introduce yourself, tell them how long it's going to take, tell them what to expect, explain, and then, thank them for choosing your organization to put them at ease. So I love to use that for videotaping because it gives the learner a very, something that you have to do, right? Something very important, but a pretty easy task. And for them to watch themselves and how that simple communication goes can be very powerful. Now, I'm sure that you guys are aware of this, that there's many times when learners can learn more than watching the video than they do actually doing it, just because they're so anxious, depending on, what the person's personality type is, that they're just watching with such intent. It's not like watching a movie where like, oh gosh, or who done it? But you're watching to think, how would I do this if I were in this situation?
You were talking earlier about kind of throughout your career, and you mentioned like communication or working with nurses that are maybe nervous in a situation or in the ER. Have you seen video, play a role in helping train that or make people feel more comfortable in their communication in a stressful setting?
Well, I think to use the video for teaching purposes afterward is where the learning would mostly occur. You would look at, like, let's look right here. When you didn't wash your hands when you walked into the room, and you didn't acknowledge the patient, and you didn't introduce yourself, right? Or conversely, you did a great job when you washed your hands, you acknowledged the patient, you introduced yourself. So you can learn on both sides of the spectrum, because just because someone does something once, unless someone else lets them know that what they're doing is effective, they may or may not repeat what they did. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So just as much emphasis needs to be placed on what learners do right as does what things don't go so well.
So, a lot of the clients that we work with, one of the common themes that they share with us is this idea of student self-reflection. So they'll watch themselves in a video and say, I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe I said that, because they're maybe not as focused in that particular aspect during the scenario. But when they see themselves, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't believe I did. Now there's like a really intense learning moment on their own actions, their own behaviors. And I'm kind of curious if you've had similar experiences from the students and learners that you've worked with.
Oh, absolutely. They watch themselves, and they're so critical of how they look, how they handle things. They're not looking for the good things that they're doing. So I think that's where a really a good instructor can go ahead and help them look for the positives as well as things that they didn't do. Because all of us, well, I'm not going to say all of us, many people want to look at, you might get 25 scores on something that you're teaching, evaluations, and you get five 1 to 5, right? And so you get 25 learners, and you get 21 5s, but you focus on, what about that 4? What happened with that 4? Are there any comments in there? So I think focusing on what you do right is just so important, especially in simulation.
When I got started in simulations almost 15 years ago, the idea was video at that time was a nice to have. And today it seems like it's a must to have. How would you kind of explain that evolution of the necessity to integrate video into those simulation scenarios? At least the high stakes scenarios, right? Not every sim is recorded, but it just seems it's becoming more and more an accepted practice that we need to record these sessions for a variety of reasons, whether it's to support student self-reflection, like we mentioned, it's to support video assist debrief, or using it to support how we're going to assess and evaluate students. I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, why video has become so integral a component to simulation.
I think that there's so many things that you can use it for, and starting with, obviously, your high stakes. When you're doing your high stakes simulation, the summative, right? Practices of summative experiences. And that's going to be either, okay, you pass or you fail. And it's can be objectively looked at by the three of us, say the three of us. Did you see that? Did you, we all saw the same thing, right? But even for your formative, just like what we talked about earlier, as far as helping learners learn things that they're doing right and what things that they could improve upon, and the whole gambit. I think the other thing with the video systems now is that there's so much more that they're able to do than when they first came out. They're less complicated, just like the simulators are. There's, so much more. Ease of use promotes use. And so I think that the systems are becoming easier to use and more people are using that adaptability. I mean, if you think about the transition from the flip phone to, the smartphones that we have now, and that learning curve there, when you have to go from, oh my gosh, I have to put my flip phone down and do what? But then, depending on what you learned with, if you were, an Android or an iPhone, that's generally what you're going to stick with, in my opinion. A lot of people that start with whatever you start with, you're just going to continue with it.
You've had quite the career in nursing. And so I'm just curious, you started as a nurse, you kind of went into clinical education, into the education side of it, but now you've founded your own business. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm curious, it's a really cool journey. And you've also established yourself as a prominent voice in simulation. So curious what your business is, how you made and why you made that pivot. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was 2017. And I had been talking with my family about, the possibility of maybe going and starting a business and just kind of doing this just because I thought it would be fun, maybe a fun way to make sure that the people that I work with are, like, I always say I like to work with nice people who are smart. And so, not to say that, that I won't work with someone that's not smart, but I won't work with someone who's mean. Like if someone's being mean to me, I'm not going to work with them. It's just not going to work for me. It just this isn't working, right? The world needs more kindness. That's all there is to it. So I started the company, and at first I lacked a little bit of focus. I was very fortunate. DePaul has a women's entrepreneur group, and I was fortunate to get selected to be in one of those cohorts. So then I had to learn things about pitch decks and how to do our elevator speech and how to sell yourself and all the things about business that a nurse doesn't want to do, like accounting and, finance stuff and marketing and just, yeah. So I was fortunate to find some people that gave me some help with that. And I honed the business down to 3 things that we do. One is we have the free podcast, the Sim Cafe. And 2, I do consulting. So if a program's learning, wanting to start off, they are looking for recommendations, I can help them with that. I like to work closely with Feroz Sakandapur. He was the president of the SimGhost at one point, but I enjoy working with him. He's very, very nice and very smart. And so we work well together. And then I do the training sessions, and I love doing the training. It is so much fun for me to help people understand what simulation is and what it isn't, because I think when you first learn about it, it just seems like so overwhelming. But then when you break it down, it's pretty, it's pretty simple and pretty usable. And a lot of people are doing it, but they just don't realize that they're doing it. And then the final thing I do is help programs, if they want to get accredited by the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, I will help them get their documents together for accreditation. And that is one of my favorite things to do. I like to call myself the accreditation whisperer, because I like to tell them what things they might not be thinking about and trying to get them to be calm enough, because once again, it's one of those things that they're going to be doing this and they're going to be looking at this and they're going to be looking at that. And I'm like, well, they're going to be, but what we really like to pride ourselves in as far as the accreditation in being a reviewer, site reviewer, is that we're not prescriptive. We're going to look at every program as their own program and help them to determine what things they're doing great and what things they might need help with. And so I do a lot of volunteer work for the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, and I really enjoy it.
Deb, I'm curious, from the accreditation perspective of your business, what are some of the accreditation standards that a center needs to go through to become accredited?
So they need to have a structure. They need to have a mission and vision that has to do with simulation. Mm-hmm. They need to have adequate funding. They need to have adequate staffing. They need to have policies and procedures. There's 7 specific policies and procedures that we're going to look for, and one of them is on audiovisual. Mm-hmm. What do you do with the videos, after the learner leaves the center, the program? So you have to do policies and procedures, and then ethics, what you're doing to expand the field. And there's different areas that you can do, that you can apply for accreditation. You need to absolutely apply for CORE, which is there's 7 components to CORE. And then you can select from teaching and education, assessment, research, and then there's also a couple other areas that you can get accredited in. One is human simulation, which is new, which is very exciting. If you're accrediting for standardized patients in the program that a program is developed, and then fellowship and systems integration, which means that the program is integrated within systems and that you can demonstrate that.
I'm curious. That all sounds really fascinating, but what's the benefit to a simulation center to become accredited?
Demonstration of quality. You can demonstrate that you are providing best practices or good practices for simulation, global recognition. There's there's probably between 250 and 300 centers worldwide that have been accredited so far. And you know how many centers there are. And the demand for this is just going up as people recognize the value that it can add to an organization. So it's real easy for a center to say, we're doing everything great, and then one person doesn't want to do it. And so they can, create a fuss. But once you've been accredited, it's much more difficult for those one-off people who don't want to play nice, because you can say, we've been accredited, and now we need to make sure that we're following the things that we've demonstrated.
Is that accreditation through SSH? Is this mandated by state or federal governments, or is it more of a way for a program to distinguish itself amongst others?
Great question, Kyle. So it is a way to distinguish themselves. However, in the state of New York, they have the nursing boards have agreed that 1/3 of the clinical that they're doing can be used. They can use simulation for those clinical hours. And they require that the program is in some way demonstrating quality. So they can either go with the SSH accreditation, or they can go by the UNESCO endorsement, but they are requiring, they have raised the standards and actually made, it's in the laws, which is new.
Gotcha. And specific to New York so far?
Yep, just specific to New York at this point.
And Going back with I have one more question with the accreditation stuff. Is there is an audio and video piece to that SSH accreditation, and I guess my question is that just for the program to show simulations to the accrediting body for review, or is that like SSH is requiring some sort of video for review or debrief with students?
They don't really require that you have video. What they require is that you have, if you do have video and audio, video, that you have policies and procedures built around them. Yeah.
I'd like to just get back to the consultative aspect of your business to learn a little bit more about what your consultative services do and who you work with.
Okay, so I work with any program that's looking for, they're looking for help. Because what happens a lot of times, and I think it's with great intention, is people will want to go ahead and do all the work after they got the grant funding or, whatever they're going to do. And they go into it, but they have some blind spots. Like they might not think about all the things that go into all the cameras you need, all the wires you need, all the special things, all the extra things that you need for the equipment, the simulators. You might not think about, for example, when I was working at Chamberlain, we had a situation where they wanted those simulation centers set up on the second floor. And there's the birthing bed that they use for simulation. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't fit in the elevator. So they actually need to take out a window and put the bed in that way. And I mean, you don't think about all these things that people who have done this have the experience of saying, yeah, you don't want to do that, right? Use that carpenter's rule of measuring twice and cutting once.
That's a really good example because it's a very visual example I can see. But what other challenges do you come across, and how do you ideas that you have to overcome some of those challenges? So if our listeners are listening and saying, yeah, I'm thinking about putting together a sim center or expanding my sim center or renovating a new sim center, what advice can you give them other than, contact me and I'll consult you?
No, I usually do really sit down with them and get to know what they want and what their vision and what their dreams are. And many centers, many organizations, they have some things that they are really, maybe they started using a particular simulator, or maybe they are more, inclined to go with a specific AV solution, right? So I think one of the things that I'm able to do is be vendor neutral. Essentially, if is a vendor in doing sales, I think that the vendors will frequently try to sell all of their products, which might be not the best need for a center. I mean, it's really, and I know that any listeners out there who can relate to this, it's really sad to go to a center and just find all this equipment that they had money for and they bought and just sitting there, right? So it's all about what's going to be, what are you going to get and what are you going to use? And if it is a center that's just going to expand, let's reuse, repurpose, recycle what you have, and then figure out what new things you want to get. Because I think right now there's a great opportunity for using the headsets and picking, into virtual reality. What are you gonna have an area set up for that to make sure that you include that in your space? What about telehealth? Are you using telehealth? And different things that you need to be thinking of for the way that the industry is changing now.
Have you noticed any specific trends in terms of centers that are adopting new technologies, new workflows, new ideas, things of that sort?
Yeah. So I would say virtual reality is becoming a reality in the sim centers. And I think that, I want to say it might have been 2018. And I remember being at the conference and there was just like, a couple of, the goggles and stuff. But now you go to the conference and there's 25 different vendors for VR, virtual reality solutions and augmented reality. And, so it's going to be interesting to watch how that space grows. I think until the headsets get really comfortable, like a set of glasses, I think they're going to always be a little bit, I think that's going to make it much easier when you can get just a set of glasses that you put on.
From being a nursing student to now advising programs on their simulation centers, things like that, you've kind of seen the changes of technology over the years. Like you mentioned, VR is a huge part of the discussion today. Do you see our nurses as better trained now than maybe when you went through the program? Like, do you see an impact from all this technological change?
Oh, absolutely. I just wish that we would have had simulation when I was in nursing school. The best thing that we had was you had to make a real bed. That was the sim lab, was making a real bed and injecting into oranges and, injecting into each other, giving each other IMs and starting IVs and, crazy to think about. But it was the old days of watch one, do one, teach one. I mean, it's scary. Yeah. Okay. Watch this. Now do it. And now teach it.
So, Deb, before we wrap up, anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I've enjoyed talking with you guys. And if listeners want to get a hold of me, they can reach out on LinkedIn or to the company innovativesimsolutions.com.
Well, Kyle and I can certainly testify to the training that you've provided. We both attended your simulation training session, walked away with tons of valuable information, how we can communicate with our clients, just to better understand their world, right? How the challenges that they're experiencing, the things that they're looking for. So we want to thank you for delivering such valuable information, not only to us, but I'm sure to our listeners and folks out there that really need the level of training and education that you can provide. So thank you very much.
You are so kind. Thank you so much. You have made my day.
Well, you've made ours, Deb. So we appreciate you joining us today.
On Record is a podcast presented by Intelligent Video Solutions, hosted by Mike Anzalone and Andy Simmons, and produced by Kyle Shellstad. Find us online at ipivs.com/onrecord and on social media at Intelligent Video Solutions.